ABC special coming to you live from the Kempinski Gold Coast Hotel. With me, Abuna Mate. Here happening is the Ghana Venture Capital and Private Equity Association's annual conference. And I have with me the CEO of the Gvca, Amma Gyampo. Hello, Amma.
Hi, Abuna.
Thank you for joining us for this conference.
Changes, regulatory changes. We do a lot of capacity building to improve the quality of our industry in terms of those who are participating in the industry as practitioners. And so this year is really around the theme of domestic capital mobilization. So how do we unlock local capital? Because at the moment, venture capital in Ghana is about 20 years old. 90% of our investments are in dollars, but from abroad.
Okay.
90%, and we're sitting on about 5 billion, in assets under management. 90% of which are foreign. So that already poses a massive threat in terms of investing, receiving investments in dollars, earning revenue in cedis, and then you have the currency fluctuations, which wipe out your profit basically.
Right.
So how do we make it easier for venture fund managers to operate, those who are emerging fund managers to set up their funds in Ghana compared to other places in the world? We are competing on a global stage, so we need to also be more competitive as a country, right? So there's certain things we are doing and have been doing to lobby and advocate for policy changes to make Ghana more of an investment hub in terms of private local capital for local venture funds and the private sector in particular.
Let's take a look at how viable this space is in Ghana. 20 years old, and I dare say not many of us are too familiar with the private equity space here in Ghana. And so how viable is it, and how much can we continue to grow and make it more visible to the greater populace?
Yeah, we're doing a lot with Gvca. As you see, we have a lot more attention this year. A lot of people are curious about what is venture capital, what is all this about, and how is it relevant to Ghana. Everybody knows you go to the bank, you take a loan, you pay them back, you pay 25%, 30% interest, and you go back again and maybe have some collateral issues, and so on it goes. But we are here to just educate the public, especially those in business, to say, look, venture capital and private equity is another alternative. Okay. If you want someone to come into your business, of course, your business has to be disciplined and well-regulated, well-structured, and doing well. So for those companies and entrepreneurs at that level, we are here to say, we're here to advocate for you. We're here to reduce the policy barriers, the regulatory barriers, also provide support, training, data, insights, to make it easier for you as an investor, and also as a fund manager, and also as an entrepreneur, as an option to debt or loans.
Right.
So we are long-term private capital. We come into your business, we invest in you as a partner, longer term, as opposed to the loans and credit that everybody knows in the market, right? You take a loan and you pay interest and you finish. And it's nothing to do with the bank. They just want their money. But for venture capital, we are actually your partners for growth. If you're at the growth stage of your business, venture capital, private equity will be here for you in that regard, for those who meet the kind of criteria that we're also looking for. Okay. It's quite a disciplined space in terms of finance. But it's an option. Like if you're paying loans regularly and you need to grow your business and you feel like maybe the loans are getting a little bit difficult for you to manage, venture capital and private equity is an option for you to explore, to speak to some of our members who are the fund managers of these funds.
Okay, so then we'll look at the way we can explore how to leverage on it. One of the issues in the system right now is about the high rates of interest.
Yes.
And companies are always complaining about it. They say that we have Ghanaian companies who have to compete against international companies who are also in Ghana. And so they say that the international companies get loans from their countries at very lower rates, and then the Ghanaian companies are paying higher rates, and so they're unable to compete. We're in a country, but we can't compete on our own stage. And so when the venture capital comes into the conversation, what more are you providing to that business person who says that, I think this is where I want to look at for this time frame, and not just in the short term, but in the long term?
Yeah, venture capital typically will take you 7 to 10 years. So it's it's like a marriage, right? You don't just invest in a company and just put your feet up or put your money in government bonds and wait for your dividends every month, your payments every month. Venture capital is a contact sport. You go together, you invest in a company, you build it together, you structure it right, you grow together. And typically between 7 to 10 years is average in our sector, right? So it's very much a long-term private capital conversation. So we grow with you based on your needs and your requirements of your business. We help you to grow. but there should be some evidence of you getting to that point, right? Before investors will even consider speaking to you.
Okay.
So it's not an easy thing to get into. I know, in terms of the market at the moment, it's not an easy option. But if you are at the right level in terms of your business and your numbers and your finances and your governance, then it's an option for you to consider as a long-term goal. And what we are trying to do is actually encourage more local institutional investments.
Okay.
So that means that instead of having dollars coming into the space and that currency risk I talked about,
right,
you now have options to have local capital mobilized. So through things like the pension funds, the insurance companies, for example, they are the ones who are sitting on local Ghanaian, local currency, right? That can be used to invest in funds or can be used to invest in other investment vehicles that can support venture capital activities in the country in local currency. And that the local currency bit is the prime thing. Because once you have local currency funds or locally domiciled funds, you cancel out at least one major hurdle, which is the currency fluctuation.
And that's one of the things that many businesses complain about.
Yes,
the dollar.
And that's why everything is so high, because the dollar is dominating the market. So if we can find a way to increase the numbers of local investors investing in funds and vehicles, then we have more local currency transactions, which will lower
in venture capital in Ghana.
Yeah, we've seen Ghana Venture Capital Association was actually spun off by a government agency, recognizing the need to mobilize local capital and to support local practitioners. So the Venture Capital Trust Fund, which is a government-backed fund, is the institution of government that set up or spun off the private sector wing of venture capital in the country, recognizing the importance of venture capital in driving jobs and, mobilizing local capital for investment in companies to grow. So we wouldn't be here without government, right? Just recognizing the need and the potential of the private capital that we are sitting on as a country. So in terms of policy, we know that we are competing in a global market, right? So after 20 years of venture capital in Ghana as an industry, we recognize there is a need to really review some of the policies. So when we started 20 years ago as an industry, there were a lot of tax incentives and other policies that have been eroded over time. So now we are back to the point where there are a lot of loopholes that we need to close. There are a lot of policies and incentives that we need to reestablish. And so these are the conversations we're having with the Security and Exchange Commission. The commissioner, the DG is here himself today. So that shows a demonstration of support for what we are trying to do. The NPRA, the pensions regulator, is also here. And so we are having consistent conversations with them. Obviously, we need to speak to people like the GRA to see how we can incentivize fund managers and local funds to be set up in Ghana. But the biggest challenge at the moment is that we are not competitive in terms of our legal structure for fund managers. Normally in the world, you would have a Limited Partnerships Act, right, or some kind of limited partnership structure, which would allow you to have multiple partners in a fund to manage the fund and contribute towards the fund. And then you have the general partners who would then manage the fund and the portfolio companies.
Okay.
But in Ghana, you have to basically set up a company as a fund manager, which is far from ideal.
Okay. So it's cumbersome.
It's cumbersome. The regulations are, need some reviews. We are having conversations. I mean, I believe we've made a lot of progress with the NPRA and with the SEC. We're currently in the middle of a review phase at the moment. So we submitted some of our suggestions for improvements to be made to lower some of the barriers to local capital asset owners, i.e. the pension funds, the asset managers. They are the ones who are sitting on billions of dollars, right, that can be used for. I'm not saying all of it will go to venture capital, obviously, but there is a proportion of investments that they are allowed to make through the regulations, which is 25%. Okay, they're encouraged to invest 25% away from government bonds, right, as alternative assets, as we call them. Currently, the 25% is there in regulation, but we only have 0.5% of our assets, local assets, going to
0.5 out of the 25.
So there's a big gap there, and we know we have to do forums like this so we can educate the potential investors, the corporate trustees, the pension funds, the insurance companies I mentioned. They are the ones who would be contributing as limited partners into funds and also creating more local funds. So we need more of those things to be done. The government and the regulators are a huge part of that conversation. And so we are in dialogue with them. We have submitted our requirements as an industry, as a market, and we recognize that we need to do certain things to build the market and bridge that gap between the 25% and the 0.5%. There's a lot of money sitting on the table, billions, that we can actually use to invest in the real economy, and that's what we want. We don't, aid is something that everyone is questioning now. We can't keep being dependent. 90% of our funds in Ghana, venture capital funds, are actually controlled by foreign investors. 90%. That's $5 billion controlled mostly by foreign investors. So where are our local investors? We need to bridge the gap. Other countries in the world have done it. Pension funds are extremely active. It's really more about a diversification play. We're not saying put all your money in government bonds. We saw what happened with the debt restructuring, right? There's no guarantees.
I was actually going to come to the
there's no guarantees. So whether you think it's bonds or was just saying allocate a little bit more towards alternative assets, real estate. A lot of pension funds have huge, numbers of scheme members, right? They are the ones who benefit from the new services, the health services, the affordable housing, all the financial services, education, all the innovations we're seeing through venture capital. We would then obviously serve these populations, right? So it's a good idea to diversify and for us to have more options in terms of access to finance for SMEs to grow and create more interesting solutions for our population.
Let's see what governments can also do to attract our local investors. And we can say we don't have local investors in the country, but like you say, sometimes you're just a little bit hesitant to put your money somewhere, but then where your money is, that's where your heart is. And so what can government do the more? We are just starting the year. We are 4 months into the year, and so we have a long time ahead of us. What can government do as part of its policies, as part of its looking forward to make sure that it encourages our local investors to look inward rather than outward?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of examples around the world that we could even just look to. I think obviously engaging the association is a great idea. We have the minister here today of finance and the Ministry of Finance. We have several representatives here today to have conversations around how we can fast track some of the policy changes, some of the regulatory changes, some of the tax incentives that we talked about. These are all things we need to connect a bit more, and also connect more with the local entrepreneurship ecosystem. There are a lot of players, managing hubs, talking to entrepreneurs every day, SMEs every day. The AGI is here, so we're just really trying to create some cohesion and some conversations around how we can structure co-investment opportunities, policy changes, maybe fast-tracking some of those. We plead with the government to help us to fast-track or prioritize some of those things so we can get to a point where we are competitive regionally and globally, and then we can see more money moving into the sector. But we have a lot of capacity building to do to educate and bridge those gaps as well. So again, we're looking at how we can, obviously increase our membership. We have Stanbic Bank who's supporting the conference this year, and they are our first banking partner and member for Gvca. So that's a huge, sign of a demonstration of the importance of the collaboration between policy, credit and equity as well. So we're just trying to pull that all together as an association. So we encourage people to get involved, understand what's happening, join as members, and then we can build the market together as an alternative to the current financing options available.
Amma, you just took over. You're heading this huge portfolio. It is huge. And what are your 3 top priorities now that you've taken over? Let's say in your shortest term of growth, what do you envisage to achieve so that in just a few years or even a few months, you can say that since I took over, this is how far I have grown Gvca to?
Sure. We definitely want to increase our visibility as a brand. We want people to understand what venture capital private equity is, what it means, what it could be. It's a very exciting and dynamic industry globally, right? Like all the apps you use on your phone today are mostly backed by venture capital, right? All these apps, I don't want to mention them to promote them today, but all your apps, these are big companies that came through venture capital, and venture capital grew across the world over time. Sometimes, in the US, it took 50 years for them to become, the Silicon Valley that we know now. But it took government intervention. Some of the big brands were invested in by government and pushed through government policy around venture capital. So that's what we want to see for Ghana. So that's one, just building the brand and understanding of what venture capital private equity is. We want to also, we're also doing things like podcasting and these events so we can share more content online so people can understand and hear from the practitioners in the space, especially here in Africa, in Ghana in particular, of course, and to understand how they can also benefit from the insights, the data, the reports, the training, and all the resources that we bring as an association to practitioners. The second thing is also really deepening the industry collaboration. So we have an industry compact, a pledge that we've launched, well, we'll be launching today.
Right.
And so it's really inviting, again, our regulators, SEC, the MPRA, some of our key ecosystem players, Impact Invest in Ghana, Savannah Impact Advisory. These are the top practitioners in the industry with Deloitte to help us to come together to aim for a more ambitious targets on the 25% I mentioned. Yeah. How do we get that up from 0.5 to 5%? Yeah, how do we just make that little jump? We think it's realistic. It's not a massive ask or massive risk, but to just allocate more of their resources towards alternative assets like venture capital. We are just encouraging that through the compact. And the third thing is really to see some actual deals, right? So we want to see more investments actually moving into specific vehicles. So we have Gvca, for example, which is a fund of funds, which is active now, and we would encourage more of our members to, for example, as a very easy first step, to maybe partner with funds like that are already available. And we've seen companies like Stanbic and their investment management wing, SIMS, being very active in the space. Petra, for example, is the pension fund, very active in the venture capital space and leading the way, like overcoming some of the limitations or conservative views to showcase that it's a viable option. Nothing is without risk, but I think the key word for us today is diversification.
Diversification. And so for those of our viewers watching and are piqued by all that you have shared with us, how do they get in touch? How do they get to know more about the venture space, especially Ghana Venture Capital and Trust Fund?
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Equity? Sure. So I think YouTube is a go-to place. We have quite a few bits of information or content on our YouTube channel. So if you just search Ghana Venture Capital Gvca, you'll find us on YouTube. We have a very active social media, so you'll find a lot of information around who's active in the space, some of our programs, our trainings, some of our policy work, what we're advocating for, and just to educate yourselves about what's happening and how to connect. And so you can connect with us through those channels.
Okay. Amma, we're most grateful for your time.
Thank you so much.
And we wish you well. 20 years in the space and growing the more and more. And we also wish you well as you take over the helms, and we hope that you achieve all that you seek to achieve.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Amma.
Thank you. Amma Gyampo is the CEO of the Ghana Venture Capital and Private Equity Association. Their annual conference is happening here at the Kempinski Gold Coast Hotel, and there's so much more that you need to know. You can watch everything happening here on our space, ABC News G8. When you go on YouTube, we'll post the video there so that you can enjoy more and more. And to all of the investors, Amma says that they are open for you to come and invest more so that we continue to grow the venture capital ecosystem here in Ghana. This is an ABC special with me, Abna Mante. Thank you for joining us.
Sisi masendi obiesi kama no enti metwem kwadwo na ponchine
soa masend pictures na ma choose new pe na fe send sika no ma no